Today we're going to work out what's underneath this lino and see if we can make this room look any better than it currently looks. When I first moved in here, there was ripped lino on the floor and I had a little peek underneath and there's pine floorboards here. And it makes me wonder why anybody ever put lino down in the first place, because these are beautiful. And unlike the room we did downstairs, they are not covered in black varnish. The plan is to sand and fill the gaps in between here, because obviously it's a bedroom, we don't want it to be drafty, and see if we can make it look a little more polished. There's bits of wallpaper stuck on here, there's some paint, so we'll see what we're dealing with once I peel all of this up. So let's take this up and see what is underneath here. I'm excited. Look at these! So this is what the floor looks like. As I suspected, pretty naked pine floorboards, some paint on it, but nothing that can't come straight off with a heavy grit floor sander. And the next thing is to remove all the glue around the edges. I'll admit I forgot about that job and it could take a while, so I'm gonna take some solvent and my paint knife and we're just gonna have to chip this away. It is Wednesday morning. We have picked up the floor sander. We're gonna start floor sanding now. The time is 9:26. So we'll see how long the first pass goes and then we'll work out if we need another one. We're definitely gonna do two because the first grit I got was an 80 grit, so quite a strong grit to blast through the top layer, hopefully some of this paint that's all over the floor. Then I have 120 grit to go in after, which should make it a little bit more smooth. Last night I picked off every single bit of this glue from around the perimeter of the room, dried it out overnight with a dehumidifier, so hopefully this is relatively simple. We'll see how long this takes. First task is to attach the sanding paper to the sander. The good thing about this floor, which I was really happy to find when I lifted the lino, was that there's not many nails that need to be hammered down. If you have nails that are sticking up, it'll rip your sanding paper, and that's expensive, so you don't want that to happen. So we really only have nails in these floorboards around the edges, which is fine because this floor sander is not going to reach the edges anyway. I'm going to have to do that with my own orbital sander. So having no issues in the main body of the floor is going to save me a lot of time. try and do the edges of this room again now that I have used turpentine to take off the very last residue from the lino tape. I've got an incredibly coarse sandpaper, a 40 grit, which I'm hoping with this massive orbital sander should rip right through the edges, and it's about midday now. I'm hoping to have this done by about 4. Might be a bit ambitious. The sticky residue on this floor is driving me insane. I've sanded around the entire edge of the whole room and the sticky residue remains, so I'm gonna have to get back on the terps. On to day 3 of sanding this floor, and the only thing that's holding us back is the residue of some lino adhesive which is still sticking to the edges of this room. I've been using a painter's knife to chip this off with some turpentine, and that's what I did before I started sanding, but as I was sanding with a heavy grit, I found quite a lot that was still hanging on. It's a really annoying substance, it's so sticky, and then when it mixes with sanding dust, it just creates these little balls of dirt, and they get absolutely everywhere. So now that I've sanded once around the edges with a 40 grit, I've got most of the old paint off that was around the perimeter of the room, but there's still this messy kind of pasty, sticky stuff all the way around the room. So I'm going to use cellulose thinners and this to try and break that down, scrape it off, and then if I have time, I'm going to go back in with the sander and we're going to do more heavy grit around the edges. And after that, honestly, this is nearly ready to fill the floorboards because we've done everything we can with the big floor sander. The floorboards have come up really, really nice. They're in really good condition. I'm really happy with the colour of them too. And hopefully it's just the edges and then we can hoover and tidy up and be done with this stage. Let's see how we get on. Okay, I am so delighted with how the floor looks after a floor sand, and now the edges are all finished. And now it's time to fill the gaps in between the floorboards. This is something that I've never done before, and I'm going to just use the YouTube tutorials I have watched to inform this part of this process. I have Bona Mix and Fill, which you mix with the sanding dust, which I have kept from this previous sand. And we're going to mix it together to make a kind of putty type glue. This is basically like glorified PVA. And we're going to spread it in between the gaps on the floor. And hopefully this will just give us A, a little bit more draft protection, and B, it'll just look a little bit more finished. I'm now going to take a saw along each of these floorboards and remove all the dirt and previous gap filler that's in between these boards that the floor sander couldn't reach. I am so happy with how this floor has turned out. It's taken me, I don't even know what day we're on now, but I've been at this for a very long time. We have done it in under 9 days though, I think, which is good. Floor sander was in here twice. I've just finished it off with 120 grit to get rid of the residue from the gap filler that I was using. And then I just took my hand sander around the edges to kind of get any residue out of the floorboards. There is a lot of residue still around the skirtings, but the more I look at the skirtings, the more I think I'm just going to rip them off and replace them in the future, I think. So not too worried about that. But for now, this has come up so nicely. This is exactly what I wanted, this white pine. I'm not going to change how this looks. I'm just going to put a diamond hard kind of varnish over the top. Matte, clear, nothing crazy. I don't want this to be glossed. I don't want this to be changed. Obviously, you can tell I did it myself in parts. There's a section just here where I obviously did not fill in between these gaps here, and I used 2 entire bottles of the filler, so I don't have anything else I can go in and fill this with. So there's little sections that definitely make it look home done, but from what I've achieved by myself in probably only 4 or 5 days, I'm really, really, really chuffed. I do think it's transformed the entire room, and I'm really excited to crack on and get rid of this green paint on the walls and make this a proper bedroom, because this looks so much more homely than the brown lino looked. I'm just so pleased that this was hiding underneath. Was it easier than the living room? Yes, I think it was, because we weren't dealing with chocolate brown varnish, and that was really difficult in the living room to get all the edges clear of varnish because it was such a dark colour. Here, to be honest, bringing it to this colour took only a couple of hours. The hard bit was removing the adhesive around the edge. So the things I have learned here, which I'm going to share for you now, should you ever do this task in the future. If you have to remove lino glue around the edge of a room, use cellulose thinners. Turpentine worked as well, but cellulose thinners and a cloth, liberal amounts of it. It stinks, please wear a mask if you're going to do it, but it's so effective at cutting through the glue and just letting you tear it off. That was the most challenging part of this, and cellulose thinners made it a lot faster. The other thing I would recommend is getting a really good orbital sander. Obviously my sander blew up during this and I went to get a higher sander. They gave me a Hilti sander worth 450 quid, which was absolutely perfect for this kind of job. I'm not saying you need something like that, but an orbital sander with quite a wide lip at the bottom so you can push it slightly under the skirting boards is really helpful. Similarly, if you're going to blast off residue of adhesive, 40 grit. You need a 40 grit. Nothing else is going to cut through that. I used a whole pack, 10 40 grit discs, doing the edges of this room. Maybe that was excessive, but I felt like that's what it took. In addition to a sander that you're using a heavy grit with, if you have a sander that has speed settings, I found with the Hilti sander, if you turn the setting down and don't use the highest power, you'll cut through any adhesive or any really difficult parts much faster. I had a sander where it went all the way up to 6, but I used it on 3, and I think that low speed and low grit were the winning combination to remove the residue around the edge of the room. I think that really made this job a lot faster. Another thing to note, if you're going to fill between your floorboards like I did and use the Bona mix and fill, you're going to need at least 2 to 3 bottles for a room this big. That's about 12 meters squared. I had 2 bottles and it just worked, but there is a section here where it's unfilled. I obviously missed it and I don't have anything left that I can go in and fill that with. Sure, it's DIY, it's not going to bother me too much, but one thing I noticed is if you get your mixture wrong, it can be really hard to spread it in between the floorboards. So you want to mix it liquid first and then add the sanding dust to the liquid. If you do it the other way around and you use too much sanding dust, then it will take you bottles and bottles and bottles of the filler mixture to create something you can spread between the floorboards. It's a bit like making icing sugar if you've ever done that. You need to start with a very small amount of everything so that you don't end up with either something that's too dry or really, really wet. Overall though, super chuffed with how this looks. I think it looks far more homely now than it did before with the lino. There will be a rug that goes in this room, but of course before then, I'm going to replace the facings and change the colour of the walls, which is making this room feel quite cold. But hopefully now there'll be no drafts. We have a beautiful surface to work on. And if you're doing this kind of project at home, Godspeed. I wish you the best of luck. It is no easy task. If I can do it, you can do it. In the meantime though, thank you so much for watching, and ask me any questions you might have about this process in the comments below.